Guys, is Siri about to answer our questions for the first time in forever? Because if you're an Apple user, you might be excited like I am to hear about this newest partnership between Google and Apple. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma Roloff, and in these episodes of Change in the Wild, I take a look at current events and how they relate back to the world of digital transformation, change management, emerging technologies, and leadership. And today, I want to dive into the most recent announcement of a partnership between Google and Apple that is meant to revamp Siri with Google's Gemini AI solution as the operating system in the background. If you're enjoying our content, consider subscribing to our channel, giving this video a like, and dropping a comment. We personally respond to every comment that we get because we enjoy having a conversation with you. There has been speculation in the market since August that this deal might be in the works, but it is now officially announced. And as a response to that announcement of this new partnership, Alphabet, Google's parent company's valuation shot up to over the $4 trillion mark for the first time in history. And it's important to note that there are only 3 other companies that have this valuation currently, or 4 trillion plus. And that is Apple themselves, Microsoft, and Nvidia. And they all have made this move over that $4 trillion mark in the last year, closely tied to AI and development of their products in that space. Now, this is obviously good news for Alphabet, but a lot of people are starting to look at this deal and be like, whew, how embarrassing, Apple. You're throwing in the towel on the AI race.
So just giving up?
And I think that this opens up a really interesting conversation as it pertains to the idea of building your own solution or buying or partnering. And I mentioned it in previous episodes of Leading Change, but I have seen a really interesting movement in the market back towards this conversation of build versus buy. So when I started in tech sales about a decade ago, that was a big question that customers were kind of grappling with. Do we have our own internal team build out proprietary software, or do we go find a solution and buy it and implement it? And at the time, it was a big back and forth because a lot of times these solutions that you were buying still required a lot of maintenance and upkeep, and you had to have developers on staff either way. But as we started to move more and more into the heyday of SaaS solutions, I started to see that question play out a lot less frequently during the sales cycle. But now that we are operating in the world of AI, those questions of build versus buy are starting to pop back up. And I think that there are a number of reasons that this conversation is resurfacing. One, AI potentially speeds up development, and a lot of companies are hearing that and thinking, man, maybe we could just build our own solutions and it won't take as long as it used to, and we can have something purpose built for us. But there's also this conversation of who owns the data if it goes into a solution that we are buying? Who owns the model? Do our competitors have access to that model? And it is making this conversation of building a solution at least a little bit more appealing to companies than it would have been a couple of years ago. And I think that this is, like, obviously at a massive scale, a really interesting way of watching some of this play out. Apple had the choice. While obviously a laggard when it comes to AI, they had their failed attempt at Apple Intelligence. They've partnered with OpenAI in the past before announcing this partnership with Google. And it's kind of been long understood that maybe AI wasn't going to be Apple's crowning jewel. But this partnership tells us that they have made a strategic decision not to focus on trying to catch up, but rather to partner in ways that they think will give them a strategic advantage. And that they are truly focusing in on probably what is the core of their business, which has really always been hardware. Their iPhones, their Macs, and the iPad, other hardware devices, AirPods that they've created. And obviously the operating system to operate on those platforms. But this partnership with Google doesn't necessarily take away from the essence of their core of their business. So in this scenario, it feels like a very intentional decision for them to go out and partner. Now, The other side of this is Google wasn't known as being the leader in the AI space and is now kind of vying for that top spot against OpenAI. And a lot of people are saying that this announcement of this partnership between Apple and Google is setting up Google for a major comeback in the story of AI. So obviously, Apple partnered with OpenAI and ChatGPT for an integration before they came to Google, and now they're switching sides. But as Google continues to release new versions of their artificial intelligence solutions, whether that's Nano Banana or Gemini, Notebook LM, they are starting to see massive adoption of these solutions and people touting that they are more powerful than what we're seeing on the OpenAI side. And so there's also this really interesting message nestled in there that even if you aren't the first to market, maybe there's still room for you to catch up. And so this makes this decision by Apple to focus on the main thing and dig into more of that like hardware side of things rather than trying to chase artificial intelligence even more interesting with the redemption arc of Google that goes side by side with it. And Google is using these types of partnerships to make their comeback in the world of AI.
Don't call it a comeback!
Not only have they announced this partnership with Apple, but they're doing some really interesting things with Shopify in terms of developing a brand new protocol that will allow for agentic shopping to happen, whether that's in Gemini or OpenAI for Shopify sites that have enabled this functionality. And they're building a framework of partnerships that allow them to have a bigger reach than they could if they were just trying to go side by side and compete with OpenAI in the game of artificial intelligence. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on both the debate of build versus buy. Do you think that that's a viable option for most companies? Is this something that they should be considering? And also your thoughts on Apple making this very strategic decision to bring Google to the table, as opposed to continuing with their partnership with OpenAI or trying to build out their own solution. I love the opportunity to keep the conversation going with all of you in the comments. So drop your thoughts below and I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. If you like what you saw, be sure to come back on a weekly basis and subscribe for more expert interviews focused on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.